All right, so we'll give it a minute for people to join in, and then we'll get things kicked off. And really appreciate you all joining us today. This is a part in our series of the life cycle of a team member, and especially with focus on engineering teams. Uh, Right now we're at onboarding and we're going to continue along the path for retention. So pay attention to those. We'll have an invite for the next one at the end here. And we do have a library on our website if you want to view some of the previous ones as well. So today's topic is going to be about onboarding and how to ramp your team members effectively so that you can scale your engineering team. My background, if you haven't joined one of these before, if you have, this might be a repeat. I am the CEO and co-founder of Strider. I'm a software engineer by background. I still code once in a while on the weekends, but I don't think my team would let me touch our code base nowadays. It's a little too big for my ability to get in there and focus on it. I've built teams from 0 to 70 plus, and Strider's the latest company, and we're helping people find and hire and retain remote engineers in Latin America. So, want to talk today about onboarding, and first starting with what is onboarding? So onboarding is that period when a new team member starts on your team, where they get to learn, absorb company's culture, values, how it works, and start to get in the groove of being productive at your company. And, we talk about this onboarding period, whether or not it is something structured. A lot of companies, the earlier they are, the less structured the onboarding typically is. I think there's a pretty large correlation with that. And as they grow, they get more and more structured because they've done it before. The roles are more routine, and they've onboarded 10 people in that same role before this new team member. So there is an onboarding, whether you structure it or not, it is there. And we're going to talk today a bit about how to better structure this so that you can get your team members on board, ramped up faster, and a couple other benefits like having a better retention rate at your company as well. And putting it into context, why we're talking about this is trying to maximize the lifetime value of an employee. And right, their value is negative, right? They're taking up resources. You have to train them. You have to get them up to speed. You spent time recruiting them, and getting from that negative ROI right at the start to that fully contributing role, the second dot on this graph. That's what we're talking about today. How can we get them contributing faster, and how can we have them contribute more effectively as well? So onboarding is that input. That's what can make this graph a little bit steeper, and get them both faster and hopefully to a higher point of contribution. And you'll see that it both reduces the amount of kind of negative ROI time that you have and increases the amount of positive ROI that you experience as well. And there's a lot of psychological foundations behind this. And this isn't my area. I'm a computer scientist. I'm not a psychologist, but luckily or thankfully, about half of Strider's team are practicing or graduated psychologists. Uh, so we do think a lot about this, both when we put these presentations together, but also in how we, offer our product and services as well as Strider. So some of these, while, if you're not a psychologist, you're probably not familiar with the terms. Neither was I before my team educated me. The first one, and we have kind of the theory here, and then, what it translates to in layman's terms. So theory in parentheses, the psychological studies and observations, and then the layman's terms. So the first one, which is social learning theory, and my team called it mentorship. When I think of it, I think of, monkey see, monkey do. You know, you see somebody do something and you repeat that behavior, right? Saying that everyone's heard of before. And, that's, I think, the uh, kind of primary way that people, learn and get absorbed into a company's culture is they kind of see what everyone else is doing and, both subconsciously and consciously try to imitate that. And by the way, that's, I think, also, going up on a little bit of a tangent here from onboarding, that's why you want to create a really great engineering culture so that, you start with this one person and or this small team, and you have a great culture and they have the right behaviors, uh, whether you like it or not, those behaviors and that culture that you put in place from the start is going to have a ripple effect when you go from 2 to 10 to 50 engineers. So that's why getting culture is right is really important. But let's talk about onboarding and not get on too many tangents today. The next one is organizational commitment as a theory, and we think of that, in layman's terms as like their emotional investment. So, memes in the Slack channel, building friendships at work, having an emotional investment, having like owned a software project, right? Having built it from scratch, been the owner of it, having those commitments to both the company, the code, and the culture are really important ways to, get the most out of people. And the next one is self-efficacy theory. So small wins, and I think this one's especially important in the onboarding stages, getting them to, get small wins, whether it's, having them ship one-line bug fix in their first day or their first week so that you can build up to, more and more complex features and then owning entire systems. This does have a basis in psychological theory. So this can help you drive performance at your organization as well. And okay, going beyond the theory and kind of the underpinnings of what we're talking about with onboarding, how can you at your organization structure and onboarding and help these new hires ramp up? So one is personalizing it. So this is really important. I don't think there can be a one size fits all for every single role across your company. A junior contributor is going to need different onboarding support than a senior executive. A software engineer is going to need a different onboarding structure than customer success. And it might sound obvious, but I think it's like a really important, albeit potentially obvious part of onboarding somebody properly. Another is balance. So you want to give them guidance, but not overwhelm them with minutia or micromanagement right from the start. So give them the support they need, give them the documentation access to not just systems but people at your company. But ultimately leave some space for them to do what they know how to do best. Another way to help them onboard faster and more effectively is by learning from peers. So loop them in with teammates. One thing that we do at Strider is, have them meet with a handful of people at the very start of their, work with us. So They'll meet with some, department area leads, but also meet with some peers in a structured manner, right? And setting in their first week, Zoom calls with the different people that they're going to meet with, so that they have kind of a, say, forcing function to actually meet with those people and learn from them and just build that connection. And that again relates back to that social theory. And lastly, track how things are working. So iterate on it if your onboarding is not working, if you feel like people aren't getting up to speed fast enough or becoming effective enough, review how you're bringing people on board, collect data, whether it's, satisfaction, retention rates, and, ramp speed, which can be a little bit subjective, but still a good stat to uh, things like not to do, right? Those are things to do, but there's some things that I think are common mistakes that companies and managers make. So I would say like probably the number one is information overload, and that goes back to the small wins point and the psychological foundations here is you don't want to overwhelm them with too much. Getting them to come in on day one and expecting them to build a whole new system from scratch. Well, maybe if you're a two-person startup and that's really the need, but try to ease them into it, right? Give them the ability to make some quick wins for you earlier on. And build up to those big things, as they, knock those out. But also like, not overloading them with information. Like if you just send them, hey, read all these documentation, you have hundreds of pages. First of all, they're never going to read it. The way I think of, the onboarding documentation is like if you as like their manager, uh, don't have like, let me rephrase that. So you should write, I would say, custom documentation for each of your new team members, or at least in the early stages when you're bringing people on in an early stage startup or first time in a role. And if it's not worth your time to write by yourself, it's probably not something that's worth them reading. That's one way that I think of it. So if you are not wanting to spend your time putting together this documentation, you're just going to, lean on, a big trove of documents and just say, hey, read this, probably not worth their time. Now, I think once you get larger as a company and you've done this many, many times before, there's going to be some standardization. So that's not to say, you need to, do everything from scratch every time. I think there is some stuff that gets rolled in, but keep it limited. Try not to overload them with information. There's only so much any person can absorb at once. Another thing that I like to think about is uh, about cultural integration. So, I think it's easy to say, hey, go build the system, learn about this documentation on our system. But you also need to think about how to integrate them into the company culture, right? Do you have, Slack channels for different hobbies and they're into that hobby? Invite them, right? You have celebration Slack channels where, it's not the default Slack invite, bring them in. Happy hours if you have folks on site or, there's another team member in the same town, try to get together, early on. And I think that kind of leads into the point about, making sure that you involve their leaders, involve their peers, and, get some support along the way so that they don't feel like they're just, drowning in over information or, not part of the team. That's again why we set up, meetings with various team members in their first week on the job. Uh, And here's a little bit more digging into our approach and, how we do things. And, we think a lot about this. So I think it's a good model to do. And we also see into, not just how it works with Strider, but we can see uh, through, developer satisfaction from, the developers that work with our clients, what works in onboarding and not. So we have a lot of data points on this, and I think we have, approach that's been refined by doing a lot of examples. So, before day one, there's, pre-work to do. This is during the interview process and, during the, time putting together the job description to make sure that, you're hiring the right people for the role, that you're setting the right expectations for them so that when they get in on day one, they knew what they were getting into. And making sure that you have some touch points before their first day. And that's not to say, send them over work. Like a lot of people are tying things up. Some people like to take at least a few days off between jobs. It's a good opportunity. And I think, especially if people are tired, I think it's a good chance to say, hey, take a week off. I've told people specifically like that I know are kind of like tired from their previous job, like take 2 weeks off before you join us, so that they come in, refreshed. And obviously that's not something you need to do every time, but I think it's a good opportunity. So getting them, coming in already starting out in a, good place, I think is really, really important. And, also have calls beforehand. Some people are super excited to get started and already want access, and they're the type who are going to read documentation before they join your team. I think that's great. And, if people ask for it, I'll always, give that kind of access before they start on their first day. It's, again, not something that I would suggest forcing people on. And I've seen companies make errors in that sense where they want people to do the job before they start on the first day. And I've seen people quit before the first day from that. I really don't recommend that. So I think that part's optional. I think it's a good sign, but definitely not a necessity nor a bad sign if they don't do it. And I think also something that you should keep in mind is, these first days, this new person is, nervous, not just like to perform well, but also about the new job, right? Did they make the right choice? Maybe they had a great job before, they really like the company, but they just wanted to, move up in their career, and your company was their way of doing it, right? And, if you, get them in and they're doing a different job than they thought in the first day, from what you explained in the interview, or they don't get onboarded properly, to where they feel like part of the culture, part of the process as well, it can risk them leaving. And I've seen people leave within days of joining a job because they knew it wasn't the right fit. And I think that's a big miss. I think that's a big miss, and I think that's mostly on the company. Now, sometimes the people who are joining just made an error in judgment too. That happens, and they should have seen what was coming, should have thought through the decision better. But I would say usually it's on the company for uh, explaining things, or, kind of starting off on a bad foot, like showing very bad signs in the culture right from day one. I think that's like the biggest risk to kind of immediate. But, it also might be that they join, they don't get onboarded, they don't get into the rhythm of things, they don't think they're performing well, and a little bit down the road they look for another job because they didn't get kind of off to the right foot. So it's not necessarily they're going to quit on you in the first week, which I have seen happen, but they could, be demotivated for the long run just on their first impression. And we also make sure that we keep an eye on, the metrics, right? Are people joining, staying, performing, and, integrating well into the team? And if not, we need to, adjust things. And we do try to put good documentation together for the roles before they start. And usually also another thing, I guess, mentioning kind of the before day one is we're like very clear, transparent with the job description, like what they're going to be doing. We don't oversell the job or the role because we want people who know what they're getting into and want to be a part of that. And sometimes I'll even counter sell a job opportunity. I'll be like, hey, you said you want this and that. Well, this opportunity is going to give these other things, right? And some people will opt out, during the interview process because I tell them that, and it's great. Because they don't get to your company, and then 3 days in, they're like, "What? Why did I switch?" That's bad for everyone, right? They're going to be in that negative ROI territory. So I think it's really important to, before day one, be really clear about what you want. And one other thing I'll add to that is making sure that the interview process is a simulation of what they'll do in their actual job, not only to be able to better evaluate and choose people, but I've found that it gives people a better sense of what they're going to get in the job. And I believe that they make better decisions on joining. And usually it's very positive, and by giving them a sense of what they're going to do, they get more motivated. But you'll have the occasional person who's like, this is not, what I want, or you'll see in their, assessments that it's not the right fit, that, it's not the right level for them, whether, uh, it's, an individual contributor level role or a management role, right? And maybe they're more junior to senior to, motivated by other things to take that job. And here's a checklist that, a pretty straightforward and simple one, but one that I think is like easy to follow. Obviously there's going to be the, your company specific things and the task specific things, but I think these are takeaways that you can use for really any type of role. From the pre-onboarding through the 30 to 90 day uh, goal here. So, or 30 to 90 day mark here. And, starting with really making sure, from day one, and again, before day one, that they're onboarded properly, that they aren't going to get lost in the cracks or end up kind of lost, especially in a remote company, right? I think you really need to make sure that they know how to navigate your systems, navigate your company, because it's not like they can, go over to somebody else's, desk like the in-person days. They need to be able to, reach out and meet with people, and, matching them with a peer during that onboarding quote phase, along with a manager, because a peer, they're going to, be a little bit less, self-conscious. Their manager, they obviously want to perform for and look good. And, that having that peer that they connect to with and connect to is somebody they can ask the dumb questions to. So making sure that you've built those connections both between the peers and the manager, and then also, making sure that you have check-ins on a regular basis, one-on-ones, usually every week to start, at least, and sometimes to continue, and then having check-ins based on performance, in that first 30 to 90 days, and making sure that it's the right fit for everyone. So now I'll pause for a few seconds and ask for any questions from the group, and we have about 5 minutes left, and would love to hear from you. All right, so let's see. Got a couple questions here. Let me make sure I pick ones that we have time for. All right. Actually, I'm going to come back to that one. That's a good question. I need a second to think about it. Assigning production tasks early, is that risky, must have, or not? Well, I personally, and I don't do this anymore, but I used to like to have them make like one push to production. Maybe it was fixing a typo, maybe it was a hello world, just something to push to production in their first day, because it meant that they got access to all the systems, and they were able to, you know, ship the, home page, even, or whatever it might be on your app, something simple, and get access. I've stopped doing that. I think it was a little bit on the gimmicky side, perhaps. But I do think like having them ship to production early is really important. And I think, the earlier they can do it, the better. It just might be a little bit less on the gimmicky side to do something like, even if it's a small bug fix, something real, doesn't have to be on the first day, but maybe in the first week. I do think that's good. I think that's like a good opportunity, if it is a risky deploy, based on your system, maybe don't have any tests written, or you have some outdated infrastructure, handhold them through the process, and, let them, ask dumb questions, right? In a kind of low pressure scenario, right? Asking those dumb questions, being handheld in the first week, like no one's going to feel self-conscious about that. But if you're doing that in like month one, two, three, they might be more reluctant to ask questions, and, ultimately they ship something bad and it breaks, and it could have been avoided. So I actually think it's less risky to do it earlier. And also gets you kind of closer to the real tasks sooner. Uh, what are the early signs of a great versus a bad hire? Uh, so that's a good question. Kind of a hard one, even though like in the moment, I think it's kind of like, at least for me, it's like fairly obvious. I will say, thankfully, we've gotten very good at hiring, so I don't have those bad ones very often. But I'll think about like maybe some in the past. I do remember one a while back where uh, this guy built like this incredible code, and he interviewed really well, and it was like all awesome, and we were really excited for him to start. We'd been trying to headhunt him for a while, and then like the first week he got in, and like it was just like a mess, like spaghetti code, like no tests. It was just bad. And it was just totally different than our, expectation. And I think that's a good one, right? Or not a good one, but perhaps like a pretty clear sign that they were a bad hire, right? They didn't match up to what they showed in the interview process. Now, there can be cases where, people are just really good at interviewing, um, but can't perform. I think that's sometimes the case. I think there's sometimes the case where, people, figure out how to kind of cheat the system and getting in. I think that's a separate discussion. But those are the worst ones. Thankfully, I haven't had like any hires that I've made in the last couple of years that were like an obvious bad fit from the start. The great hires, I think, and not everyone on the flip side from bad is great. I think there's a big scale, right, of like solid performers that you want on the team. But the great ones, I would say they get in, sometimes they're reading stuff before the job, sometimes not. But on day one, they're not just like taking the tasks that you give them, but they're, figuring out the, figuring out the goals that they want to hit, figuring out better ways to do things that than you've thought of before. They have like a high energy about them to be able to take on tasks, and you're like pleasantly surprised that you're like, wow, that's a good hire, or wow, that person's like more senior, more independent, more quick to get up to speed than I expected. And those kind of turn out to be the great hires. Because I think uh there's always a risk in hiring. You're dealing with humans, there's no perfect science around it. we try to make it as good as possible, but people still do make mistakes. And you know, there's always kind of a thought in the back of my head is like, oh, like that person was good. They made it to the final interview. I like them, but is it the right fit? Could somebody have been better? And then, the moment I'm like, okay, that was a great hire is like, once they get in, they're hitting the ground running, doing stuff, making it better than you thought. And that's kind of the moment where I'm like, okay, I made a good decision there. Um, and I know we're at time, and I would say one more question. I'll take one more question. How often should a new developer receive feedback in the onboarding phase? Daily, weekly, etc. Um, I think in the early phase, like formally one-on-ones weekly should happen in the first couple of months. And at least uh you know like I think in the first couple of weeks there's some kind of daily check-in, right? If it's just a little Slack message accountability where it's like, hey, this is what I've accomplished. uh I think that's sufficient. Depends on kind of the job too and their level. I think every week they should be having a one-on-one. And then, at least at like day 30, 60, 90, there should be, basically like, hey, this is how you're doing. Here's what you could improve. Here's what you're doing great. And the people who ask for this feedback, I've also found that, that's another good sign is when they're asking for feedback. They're not, first of all, they're conscious of like wanting to do a good job, but they're also, uh, you know, not trying to hide from bad feedback either. They're not afraid of what the response will be. So I'd say like, the feedback cycles in the beginning should be fast. Again, kind of like a weekly cadence with, set meeting times plus like a monthly cadence for the first month of kind of like official feedback session. And that can just be during the one-on-one. Uh, and like really early on, there should be like communication on like basically a daily basis. But maybe not necessarily feedback like, hey, this is good or this is bad. It really depends on the work. But yeah, at least weekly formally and monthly kind of a bigger set. So really appreciate you all making it here. There's one more question, but I do want to be respectful of people's time who are hanging around after the call. And just want to say thank you. We will have more for you. Next is about retention, how to build systems, culture, feedback that retain the top developers, but it's also kind of general applicable knowledge you can use for any type of role as well. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you later.